This is when people say trigger warnings, I'm going to give you a trigger warning. My job is to make you uncomfortable. So just understand that. That's what inclusion and diversity is about. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable so we can move through this shit and move on. So, what we're going to talk about today is what happens when treating everyone equally is unequal. What if equality, fairness, is not the answer? I'm Kim Crayton. You can, this is my stuff, hashtag cause a scene, 2 websites, kimcrayton.com and hashtag causeascene.com. I always put my credentials up here because, as Chris says, I'm originally from Atlanta, but someone in the audience is always, because this is a tech industry, why should I be listening to this black woman? So I put my stuff up here. This is why you should be listening to me. I am I taught high school. I'm a certified special needs teacher. So I am passionate about autism and people on the autism spectrum and neurodiversity, because as a special needs teacher, it pissed me off the fact that I had some very brilliant students, but because their caseworkers and their parents didn't understand anything about their abilities and how they could work, they ended up in grocery stores and Walmarts and stuff like that. So I actually have a program called the Spectrum Codes, and you can find it on Twitter at the Spectrum Code. And what I'm doing is helping people on the spectrum transition into tech. And if you want to be a part of that and help us out, please, we need your support. But I also have a master's degree in training and development, which means I write curriculums, workshops. This morning I woke up at 6 o'clock and wrote this talk. It's just who I am. It's just my level of skill. I'm getting a doctorate in business administration, technology, entrepreneurship. I always want to understand how businesses work, and particularly how technical businesses work. If you have, and you'll see this, especially in DevOps, people think they have a business, but what they actually have is a product or service. There's no structured business around it, and they don't understand why they can't scale, why they can't evolve, and why they can't recover if there's a problem. My research topic is successful strategies for increasing organizational knowledge sharing. And the research question is, what mentoring strategies? I also have been giving a lot of talks on mentoring. What mentoring strategies do successful software development managers use to increase organizational knowledge sharing? We do no longer live in an industrial economy. This is an information economy. And so what is in my head, which is considered tacit knowledge, is important for innovation and differentiation. And if I can't get that out of my head and pass it throughout the organization, organizational leaders aren't able to use that for differentiation and innovation. And that's a waste, because then that information goes with me when I leave, and that's vital information. And what that is now, this knowledge is considered an asset, just like a building or anything else. And also my upcoming book, Mentoring for Inclusion, because as you will see, I don't talk about inclusion from a very narrow perspective. It's not just gender and race, it's everybody's experience. So how do we create organizations that everybody feels included in? So let's define terms. I am an educator by trade. I'm also a researcher. So I like to start with everybody on the same page. You ain't got to agree with the terms, because this is my talk, but this is what I'm going to say what they are. So there's no misunderstanding. People understand what we're talking about here. Let's talk about privilege. Privilege is about access. When most people talk about privilege, they just talk about white men. I don't have a problem with white men, actually. They're my biggest allies. I have a group called the League of White Men. And what the League of White Men is a group of individuals who I call power allies. So an ally is a person who understands about privilege, and they're the bleeding heart liberal, they get it, until it makes them a little uncomfortable. A power ally is a person who intentionally makes themselves uncomfortable so that someone like me is very comfortable. So I have members who are legal white men who, when I need something, like if my laptop goes out, it's because I need a new laptop, but it's coming in the mail because somebody in the legal white men decided, you know what, her work is important, let me buy her a laptop. So this is what this is. I'm out here in front. People keep putting me out here in front, and I'm just going to be honest, white men around me, because you know where the secret doors are. You know where the keys are. Why in the hell should I be making this stuff up? I don't know the rules. The rules were not meant for me. I'm going to ask you to tell me what I need to do or open the door for me, and then get the hell out of my way so I can do what I need to do. because I don't need you talking for me. But privilege is about access, and I put anybody ever seen these little monkeys? They're in Japan. Okay, well, usually when you see them on National Geographic, everybody just talk about how cute they are. But I recently saw a documentary with David Attenborough, and I don't know which one because I've watched so many of them. But it was actually helped me understand about privilege. Because when people talk about privilege, again, in the United States and most colonized countries, we talk about white males. Privilege is anybody, any group that has access that others don't have. So these monkeys, the ones that you see in the pools, everybody talk about how cute they are. No one actually really shows you the ones that are sitting outside the circle who are not allowed in. The only monkeys that are allowed in these pools come from a distinct, they're matriarchal, and their children. If you're not an immediate part of that family, there are actually male monkeys that stand outside there and will not let you come in. So while these monkeys are getting very warm, there are monkeys that are outside of this thing looking in, freezing. All right? So I say this because I can think of forests and trees. So it's not about one group of people. It is about any structure that is in place that excludes other people and you have access to it. And usually it's unearned access. You have done absolutely nothing to gain it. Underrepresented is about numbers. So we talk about women being underrepresented in tech. That's true. I have an issue when we say white women are marginalized. White women are underrepresented in tech, just like all women, but they're the only group in tech that are making gains. It's people of color, women of color, who are marginalized, and that's about treatment, who aren't making gains. So anybody of color is not making gains in tech. White women are making gains in tech, particularly in countries that have been colonized, is because, and I'll specifically speak to the United States, is because they have privilege. They are a part of privilege. They are white, they benefit from unearned privilege. Marginalized individuals are people who look like me. We've historically been treated poorly. We've historically been oppressed by privileged individuals, and so our numbers are not making gains in tech. So when we talk about diversity, I like to think of variety. It's about, when you have that Crayola box, or wherever country you're from, when you get a box of crayons, there's usually more than one color in there, because what's the point of having a box? And so it's about all those different colors. And when your kids start drawing stuff, they make the ugliest pictures, but you get so excited about all the colors they're using. Oh, you want to use it? It's about variety, and you don't tell them, I would think in development, you wouldn't say, don't use that color because it's a bad color or whatever. You just let them explore and design and do all these different things and just sit back and watch them create something. That's what variety is about. But my holy grail is inclusion, and it's about experience. It's about the experience people are having. So to me, it's a spectrum or a hierarchy. Yeah. Because when we talk about privilege, that is the first thing we need to define, and then each level below it till we get to inclusion. So it's like people are looking for very complex, very simple solutions to complex problems. So they say, oh, we have a diversity or we have an inclusion problem. And so one of the reasons I like to define this is because they're not the same thing. They're two different problems. So you can have a group of crayons sitting at the table, but if the group of crayons can't draw, they're not included. There's a big difference. And so we keep looking for simple solutions to these very complex problems, and that's where we keep, I can't even remember who wrote it, but it was an article that was the fatigue of diversity and inclusion, because organizations are feeling fatigue. Because what they're doing is throwing spaghetti on a wall and seeing what matches. And most times, it does not work. So inclusion is not equality. Inclusion is not quotas. Conclusion is an experience. Does everyone need to be equal in order to experience inclusion? And I'm going to say no. And this is based on the research that I've done. Who's ever heard of the term multi-potentialite? Oh, okay. So a multi-potentialite is a person who is very much a generalist, but not on the surface of a generalist. I am not a specialist. I have very, very eclectic tastes, and then I go very deep into something, and then I come up and I can go to something that to other people would seem so not connected, but it was a thread that I pulled, and then it's going deep in several different subjects. So I am an educator by nature. I am a researcher. I am a historian. These are all these things that give me the information. So I'm always looking at very different kinds of content. So I just watched a American Experience, The Gilded Age. And that was the first time people talked about the 1%. See, this is why I like history, because people think what's happening now is something new. It's not anything new. We've been here before. What's new is people who are underrepresented and marginalized actually have a voice and access to the same platforms that privilege was only available to privilege. So you're able to hear us now. But the Gilded Age was when our two parties, Republican and Democrat, switched. When the Democrats saw that, J.P. Morgan bailed out our country, one man. We were in a depression, and one man went to the president and said, "You don't know how to handle this. Let me get loans to bail us out." And this was before the Federal Reserve. This documentary starts with these 1%ers spending God knows of money to go to this one party where they were dressed in fancy dress, because they had no idea how to even spend this money. But then you have other people who are in the heartland or who are working in the urban communities who had no food, no place to live, just homeless. Their crops they couldn't get prices for their crops. And so there was this very big gap. So let's not believe that what we're experiencing now is something new. Separate but equal. I can only speak, and this is another reason why I like the League of White Men, is because their job is to help communicate my message to other white men. I have no white male experience. So I only can speak from a black female from the South who was always told, "You know what, you're too loud, you're too this, you're too that," because I never fit into that genteel Southern crap. Yeah. I was that kid, "Don't go in the woods," "Yeah, Kim, go in the woods. There's something in there they don't want you to see." I was that kid. And mind you, this was during the time of the missing and murdered children, so my mom was always like, "Oh shit, where's this girl at?" I was on the bus riding the bus by myself at 10. I've just always been that. I'm gonna do what I wanna do. What you gonna do, whip me? I had a whipping before, what's that gonna do? But I'm going on an adventure. But separate but equal, we saw that with the Board of Education trials, or the what am I trying to say, guys? Brown versus Board of Education. What was that though? It wasn't a trial. I'm just like, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. The Brown versus Board of Education. There was no equal. It was very much separate, but there was no equal. Saving Capitalism. Who's seen that movie, that documentary with Robert Reich? Woo! Yep, you need to watch that, because everybody is talking about capitalism now, and the stuff he's talking about in there was talked about in the Gilded Age. It is nothing new. But what is interesting is the Powell memo. I had never heard of it before. And the Powell memo this was after the civil rights and women's rights, and people were very much disbelieving in business and the fact that it was controlling our government, which it has been since the big start of the industrial age. So the Chamber of Commerce went to this guy named Powell and asked him to write a memo. And he has set out very clearly how business can take over the government. And you need to watch that video, because when I have these talks, I stay clear of politics and morals, because there are so many business cases for inclusion. But you need to see that, because it would help you understand why we're where we are, and why your vote means less than a business owner if they want something to happen. You need to watch that, and it's on Netflix. Salesforce, 60 Minutes interview this past week. Salesforce CEO said, "Hey, His head of HR came to him and said, do you realize that we have a gender pay equality issue? He said, not in our culture. God, no, not in our culture. We don't have that. Yes, you do. You have a very big gender equality issue. And so when she said, let's do an audit. And he's like, he thought he was going to prove her wrong. They did the audit, and they had a very, very big issue. And it took them $3 million to bring everybody up in Salesforce at the same pay grade. But the next year, they found out they were back in the same situation. And what it was Salesforce is the fastest growing company in tech. And every time they acquired someone, because I'm going to say it, and you know what? So what? Because to me, inclusion and diversity is not in their DNA. It's something that happens later. When they acquire new companies, because there's pay inequity there, it also affects them. So every time they've done it again, so they had to spend another $3 million to bring those individuals up. To me, if it was a part of their DNA, of their culture, every time they went out to look for a company, they would have a conversation with the CEOs of that company. What is your gender? What is your pay? And if it is not equal, you need to bring that up before we buy you, or as soon as we buy you, that's something we're going to look at. And then Stack Overflow. Boy, I'll tell you about that shortly. So the goal should be for people to have similar and common experiences, not the same. So this is my, equality is not as binary as people think. We think, again, because you're technologists, you think of variables and these very binary zeros and ones, and that's not what this is. These are human things. And so we struggle with this. So just in the United States, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was defined by privilege. So privilege decided what my life, liberty, and my pursuit of happiness was as a descendant of slaves. I have a problem with that because y'all did a really shitty job on this. People are still dealing with the effects of what privilege said life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness was for blacks. So we make a mistake when we continue to define the American experience based on the designers of the Constitution laid out as ideals. We see this every day with the First Amendment right, with the Second Amendment rights, or whatever. These people who wrote this was 1772. They had no idea. They were out in the wilderness, so yes, you needed guns. You needed all these things. They did not foresee, they were not clairvoyant, to see into the future, to see that, in 2018, we'll still need these things. But because they didn't define certain things, it leaves everything up for interpretation. You can sit at a table and have some conversation, and everybody have a different idea of stuff. That's why I like to define terms at the beginning. So they understood, they debated slavery, but they realized that the Southern slave owners were not going to be a part of this if they said abolishment of slavery. So even they knew the challenges of equality. And then when we did say that blacks were more than percentages of people, we still didn't give them the right to vote and all these other things that happened. So cause is seen. This is the movement that I did not intend to start. Actually, what it was at the end of last year, I was talking to a friend and I was like, you know what, I'm feeling a little bold. I've been talking on the stage for a year, and I've been saying some stuff that have gotten people uncomfortable, but hell, ain't nobody shot me, so I'm going to keep pushing the envelope here. And so I was like, 2018 is going to be my year to you know once you get the genie out the box, you can't put it back in? And so I also tell people I should come with a PSA, because once I tell you something, you can't go backwards. So what you do is, particularly people of color, they start going back at night when they're laying in their beds, and they start thinking about all the things that they thought were their issue, but was actually a part of privilege, and then they get really pissed off, and then they come to me the next day, I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, I should have came with a PSA, my bad. Because that thing you did, or that person said something to you that was not about you. So I'll give you an example. And this is gonna make some white women uncomfortable, but you'll be okay. You don't have to walk around in this skin all day. So, I have a video pinned to my Twitter that says terms you should stop using to describe people like me and people like me. Aggressive, defensive. Oh yeah, see, that's the color woman said that right there. Intimidating. I've added angry. And I can't think of the other two. So this is what's happening with women and why women aren't collectively making gains in tech. White women understand. Every time you get your feelings hurt because someone did not agree with you and you start that crying shit, it affects people of color in the workplace. Because what that happens is those things get into people's HR records. And then they don't get promoted because you don't know how to deal with your own emotional development. That is not my issue. If we're having a conversation and I disagree with you, you better not share one tip. Because I ain't hit you, I ain't done nothing to you. Because what happens is, white women, you say you're feminists and are against the patriarchy, but when you're challenged, you fall back into that white female fragility, and that is a problem. That is a problem for all of us moving forward. Because what's happening is, although white women are making gains in tech, your experiences are not improving. They still treat you like shit. So until we get there together, everybody's going to have a bad experience. So think about that. Every time you're someone of color, and I'm saying this because black women or women of color are starting to have conversations, and I say this because, again, people bring me on stage to make you uncomfortable, to tell you the truth. We're starting to question, are white women the bigger enemy than white men? That's a conversation that's being had in rooms of people of color, of women of color. This is something you need to understand. So when you come across someone and your feelings get hurt, recognize that your feelings are your responsibility. So what's the cause of scene is a strategic disruption of the status quo in technical organizations, communities, and events. So my biggest whale is Stack Overflow. And if you're listening, told you I'm not going anywhere, buddies. So I use hashtag cause of scene Stack Overflow, or SO, because I've been having conversations online, and well, the survey came out again, and of over 100,000 people, 92% were white men ages 18 to 34. We know that's not the developer community. We know that's the Stack Overflow community. But the problem is that business leaders will be using that data to make decisions because they're putting that data out as if that's a global community. And I have a problem with that because it doesn't include anybody. And then they lumped the others in, people of color, transgender, binary, they just lump all us together, and that's less than 9%. So when I challenged them online and asked them, what are you doing? Because you say you're doing something, what you doing? Somebody came back and told me, well, we reached out to 70 global underrepresented organizations. I was like, dude, we have over 70 underrepresented groups, organizations in Atlanta. You didn't do enough. And so I'm sick of people saying, oh, I checked that box, or we did this thing. It didn't work, so it's their fault. Another reason one of the people said something, and I had to clap back on, was the underrepresented don't complete the surveys at the same rate as white men. Why is that? Oh, because it's too long. Oh, so you're making an assumption on correlation, which is demeaning to a whole group of people, because what that translates to, particularly people who think people of color are lazy as shit, is that, oh, they're just too damn lazy to fill out a survey. I have a problem with that. The survey isn't relevant to us. There could be a whole lot of questions. You have not been in our communities. We don't trust you. Why would we give you information? So don't make these assumptions. So what I'm asking people to do is, hey, if you've had a negative experience on Stack Overflow, because they can continue to think that we're just making this stuff up, please just share your story using that hashtag, because we need to stop being silent. There needs to be something going on. And the reason I chose Stack Overflow is because they're the biggest whale out there. And I have concerns that on this platform, because there's such a limited perspective, when we're talking about AI, machine learning, and deep learning, we're going to be running into some problems really quickly, because people are copying, pasting code that comes from one perspective and does not include everyone else. And I say that because sometimes when you go into a bathroom, you wash your hands, and it doesn't register, you can't get the water to come on. I thought it was me until I saw several articles that they're not coded to see dark skin. So I'm just up there just like, and it's nothing about me, but because I now know that, before I didn't know that, I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I turn on the damn water? But it's not. So it's about global. You cannot create products for a global market from one perspective. It doesn't happen. We're not our mom and pop store where you only had to cater to the people in your community anymore. You have global constituents. And what you don't want to do is unintentionally harm them in any way. So I want to see these things on Stack Overflow. And I am not shutting up until somebody from that organization sits down and has a conversation with me. I want to see a strategic plan. Don't just keep telling me, oh, we're doing something, but we just don't know what to do. There are people out here who get paid for this. And this goes to the first person's talk. No one wants to pay for this. Everybody wants people to do inclusion and diversity, but no one wants to pay for this. They think this stuff is easy. I have skills that many of you do not have that have been developed over years. What I do is quite hard. And when it comes to 21st century skills, you will be replaced by a robot before I will. That's just the honest truth. Because they're creating systems where you don't have to code. DevOps will be obsolete. So if you don't have these human-centered skills, you're going to be in trouble. So I want to see a plan. Don't keep telling me, oh, we tried this thing. What is the strategic plan? Because I believe in outrage is reactive and strategy is proactive. It's not a strategy. It doesn't mean anything to me. Documentation for outreach. I want to see what you're doing. Don't just tell me you're doing something, because I want to see what you're doing to make sure it's meaningful and effective. A process for reporting inappropriate behavior, and then that we have a problem with that because now we need to define inappropriate, because everybody has a different definition of what inappropriate is. That's why code of conducts have problems, because everybody has a different definition of what harassment and all these other things are. I want to see at least 25% participation of underrepresented and marginalized in next year's survey. I don't know what y'all have to do. I know y'all stand outside of women who code. I don't care. You need to get some people who don't look like white men ages 18 to 34 to fill out this survey. I want to see a meaningful academic study, and I bring this up because they told me they did an experiment with mentoring, and as I said, mentoring is my expertise. When I looked at the study, it was not a mentoring experiment. It was actually a coaching experiment, which had nothing tied back to anything. So I was like, you are even using the wrong terminology. This is not even mentoring. If I were you, I would go replace all in that doggone document and put coaching and not mentoring, because it's misleading. I want to see an onboarding process for new people, because they keep saying, well, Stack Overflow was never meant for new people. I don't care what it was meant for, new people are using it, so you need to fix it. Because unless Stack Overflow is a closed community where you have to sign in and agree to terms of service, which tells you how to ask a question, and when I Google, you're the first 3 things that come up, don't tell me I don't know how to answer a question. I went in and I asked the question, just answer the damn question. And I want to see reporting, a regular reporting. You need to give this community a transparent report of what you're doing and how it's working. Because that's how business works, right? They make money. This is a business, right? So I'll close with, I'm here. I'm not asking permission. I'm giving notice. So watch out. Thank you.
That was awesome, Kim. I do a lot of stuff, mapping, strategy, org design, cultural impact, complex system analysis, and it's just, this is all in sync with all that stuff. It's a really good talk. Anybody got any questions for Kim? We do. Jamie's got a question.
There's always one person. Have you come across the social model of disability? Because all of your talk is just reminding me of so many of the accessibility stuff, where they also overlap, and the idea with the social model that it's impairment plus a badly designed environment equals disability, and I suppose difference plus a narrow-minded environment equals exclusion.
And I have not come across that research, so please send, you know how to contact me. But because I am a certified special needs, I understand that. So that's why I like to talk about inclusion as an experience. So if your websites, if your products, if all these things have not, because you're not going to hit everything, but if you're not considering anything, you have a problem.
Other questions for Kim?
That light's following me. I thought it was.
Anybody?
All right.
What? One more?
I do like microphones. Can never get me to. I didn't talk for 17.5 months. Now I can't get me to shut up. If there was one thing that I could do to help, what would it be and why?
I'm going to tell you something specific you can do to help. The two people who will be, because two people from my group will be doing enlightening talks today. If you would mentor them, I need them into tech space. Kayla would be talking about discrimination against people in the workplace for people on the spectrum, and she's also Hispanic, and she's a lesbian. So she has very many intersectionalities. And Bennett, who you met earlier, if you can specifically connect them to a place, because people keep telling me, oh, this is important, just like inclusion, but when the shit hits the fan, no one is there to help them. There's only so much I can do. I don't know those technologies. I'm a very technical person in another way, and I'm there to help them, support them emotionally and that kind of thing, but they need technical support. So this is very specific to you. All right.
So I get a lot of similar feedback. The terms you don't like to be described as, I can get angry, I'll admit that. I've gotten better about that on my own, but intimidating and other such, I always correct with passionate. And I'm a passionate person. You're seeing passion rise in me. Can we describe you as passionate?
You can describe me as well hell you want to. It doesn't mean now I'm going to take it on. I have my own definition of who I am. I really don't like the term. People are calling me an advocate, an activist now. I'm not an activist. Actually, what I want to do is get this shit done so I can go on and do something else. This drains me. When I leave here, I don't really want to talk to anybody. I am a natural introvert, but I was the only child who moved a lot, so I had to figure this shit out. So, but I also know that I am not a person. I've tried to walk away from inclusion and diversity and focus only on business, but as I focus on business, I keep seeing it just keeps coming back up because this is a big issue, and in the information economy, you cannot rely on the information of one group of people. So you can call me passionate, you can call me whatever, just pay me.
And we are starting to see that. You know, we brought it up earlier during Sal's talk, who has room to move at work? Can you get up and go do stuff? Can you leave the building? Do you have remote work options? And we saw a lot of hands go up, not everyone in the room, and I immediately pointed out the job board. So it is starting to hit them where it hurts. There's return on investment with this, where you might be able to keep your dev shop up if you don't have a humane workplace, but you're not going to have the best developers, technologists in the industry. You're going to have the people who...
Well, one of the things that's a problem, we can look at Facebook. Okay, so the Cambridge Analytica thing, they did something 2 years ago. What the first questions that came up in my mind, we're talking about something you think you handled in 2014 or whatever. It's 2018 and it's coming up and these people are still using data. Was there no one in that table who, when we go back to sales talk, who was this dissent that says, hey, we're not doing enough. Hey, 6 months later, has anybody checked back and seen if they've done anything? This is the problem. When you have this group mind, people don't challenge. People don't feel safe enough to challenge. You have to create these spaces where somebody can say, you know what, that's the shit. I really respect you, but what you said was full of shit. Nothing personal, but that's what that was. So, and then I'm going to tell you why that was. So I always go back to great classroom management. When I was a teacher, my students thought I was crazy because I was, stop doing that. This is why you need to stop doing that, and this is the strategies for what we're going to do next. And this is one reason that so many white men are scared or frightened to get on these things is because no one's giving them solutions of what to do. We keep slapping your hands and saying you're bad people. I don't think you're intentionally bad. You're just privileged. You have no freaking idea. It's not even you're not even doing this purposely, most of you. It's just like me. I don't know what it's like to be in a wheelchair. I could sympathize, but I don't You know? So it's like not your experience. There's so many things. That's why I make sure I don't say America when I'm talking about, because we ignore that there's Canada, Mexico, Central America, Latin America, but we think we're just the Americas. We're not the only America. So that's why you need these productive, dissenting people who are going to clap back and say, hey, and so that's why you don't need people to call you aggressive and all these things. No, I have a point of view, and my point of view is just as valid as your point of view.
Absolutely. And I've done that. There was a toxic practice in a shop I was in, how they were monitoring productivity. I won't dive into the details. But yeah, I called them out on it, and they threatened to fire me. And I'm like, come at me then. Like, you know, like, I'm not, if you want to shoot me out of a cannon for doing my job, that's just confirming my hypothesis that this shop has some toxic funk to it, right? But that's a scary thing to do, right? The people who are paying your bills be like, yeah.
And even in that, though, you have privilege because the average person, underrepresented and marginalized person, when someone says, hey, you're going to be fired, they clamp right back up because they need their job. They don't, it's not as easy for them to get another job in tech, and we see it. So people don't feel safe to tell you, you're screwing up. You're causing them harm, and that's why I'm in Stack Overflow's ass. You're causing, at best, an unwelcoming environment. At worst, you're causing psychological harm to other individuals, and you have no right to do that.